Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. And we are at the beginning of the 2036 to 2037 offseason. And the Royals have done the unthinkable. We have completed a three-peat, third consecutive World Series championship. You can see 15-0 winners in the deciding Game 5 of the World Series against the Cubs. So it's been a really good run with this team. You can see 15 seasons in charge, 11 playoff appearances, and now 5 championships, including the last 3. Will be a very different team next season, as our longtime star, Bobby Witt Jr., just retired. It actually worked out well for us. Hate to see him go and not have the chance over the next few seasons to potentially have pursued 400 home runs and 3,000 hits and some other milestone numbers with him. But over the last probably 16 months of his career, his ratings just took a complete dive. He was not a regular starter for us by the time we got to the playoffs. And actually in the ALCS and the World Series, he wasn't even involved in a platoon. So retired at the age of 36. We kind of covered all of his statistics and his accomplishments at the end of our last episode, but we'll touch on him shortly. But clearly moving on from Bobby Witt Jr. is going to mean that these Royals look very different next year. That did open up a lot of money for us to potentially spend. He was going to be making $34 million for the upcoming season, so the fact that he will be off of our books is a positive for us. And I had thought about ending this series at the end of Bobby Witt Jr.'s career, but it was just kind of a abrupt and somewhat unsatisfying ending to his career, not being able to, as I touched upon earlier, chase some of those stats with him and face, he's got 387 career home runs. We're near what might be his last season. He's not as good as one of these other players on the team, but we keep kind of playing him to try to get there. Kind of not exactly what the Cardinals have been doing with Albert Pujols this year, because he's actually been hitting incredibly over the last couple of months. But I think you get the point, and we won't have to deal with that type of tension going forward. But given that we've won 3 World Series in a row, we're going to play at least one more season with this team and see if we can join the New York Yankees as the only franchise in Major League Baseball history to have won 4 World Series championships in a row. But before beginning that quest, we're going to take a look back at our top and bottom performers over the past season. You can see that we got off to a really good start, slow start in March, but that was just 4 games, but then played over 700 baseball in April and May, then kind of slowed down steadily as the season went on before finishing with a losing record of just 10-13 in September. But once the calendar turned to October and we got into the playoffs, the Royals went 11-2 in the playoffs. And as I talked about, 3rd title in a row. Had the best offense in the American League with 849 runs scored. And you can see we were first place in almost every offensive category. The big thing that would be nice to improve is the number of walks we generate, where we were second to last in the American League. Pitching was actually a down year for this Royals franchise, finishing 6th in the American League in runs allowed. Thinking about the team, we've got some work to do in the bullpen. It's historically been a strength of ours, and we just don't have a lot of arms and a lot of depth and a lot of quality out there at this point. So we've been, over the last couple of years, signing a fair amount of relievers each offseason to 1-year contracts and just kind of trying to paper things over, so to speak, and keep moving in the right direction, which we've obviously done by winning. But I'm reasonably enthusiastic about the 5 pitchers we're going to potentially have in our starting rotation next year. But the bullpen is pretty bare at this point. So we're going to have some work to do this offseason rebuilding the bullpen. You can see in most of the pitching categories, we were relatively middle of the pack. We're first in WAR, but we were near last in hits allowed. Worst in the league in BABIP, so maybe that's a sign that we'll get a little luckier next season, which could result in our runs allowed being better. And if you were looking closely at the owner goals, one of the things they want us to improve next year is our defensive efficiency, which was 15th in the American League. We have been a really good pitching and defense-focused team for most of this playthrough, so it's actually a bit surprising that we've kind of fallen off that far in terms of our defensive efficiency. But nowhere to go but up, given that we were 15th, and ownership expects us to win another title within the next 2 years. Clearly, if we do it next year, that'll be 4 in a row, so that's the goal at this point. And looking at that pitching staff, as I mentioned, I do like our starters, led by Bryce Hillman, who we re-signed to an extension, which will kick in next year, 6 years, $15 million a year. Definitely a bit longer than I want to go for a guy who's going to be 38 by the end of the contract, but at least the final year is a team option for us. And I also do like the fact that Hillman has been durable over the course of his career. 12-8 this year with a 4.09 ERA, 3.53 Sierra. The fans like him. He, to me, is an excellent number 3 starter and a respectable number 2 starter with what he has. Ben Borgman is probably the biggest question we have in our rotation at this point. He opted in to the final year of his contract for next season at $19.5 million. Probably, given that he is going to be 35 by the start of next season, and he's wrecked physically, and he's coming off the worst year he's had since joining Kansas City, 8-5 record, but a 5.34 ERA. Would certainly have preferred that he opted out, but not surprised that he did opt in. You can see his stuff and his movement are still acceptable, still his excellent control. The issue is that he's kind of trending towards being a 2-pitch pitcher. His fastball's below average at this point, still has an excellent changeup and a respectable curveball, but his stuff is not just what it used to be, and it definitely showed up in the results that he put in on the field this year. But the positive thing is we were able to keep him relatively healthy. Third starter, Caleb Loggerwell, who has not been as superhuman as far as avoiding injuries the last few years. We used to talk a lot about the fact that ever since he joined us, he had pitched 33 starts for us for 7 straight years, it looks like. Mr. Consistency, down to 30, 29, and 21 starts the last few years. But still had a 9-3 record with a 3.10 ERA this past season. So an excellent year. You can see with Bobby Witt Jr. gone now, I think that Caleb Loggerwell will be, I believe, maybe he's not the only player on the team who was there for all 5 World Championships. I think that Alex Vasquez, one of our top hitters, might have been there for the first championship in 2027 also. But Loggerwell still definitely profiles as a very good pitcher for us. And just want to note one last time, he's probably never going to make the Hall of Fame because he's 34 years old, 144 and 98 record, 3.63 ERA. I guess there's an outside chance he gets to 200 wins, which is not like 300 wins for a pitcher in the Hall of Fame back in the old days, but still a mark that a lot of people don't get to. So if he gets to 200 wins, that would certainly help his case. The fact that he's only been a 3-time All-Star probably doesn't help him, but he is a 5-time world champion at this point, and he now boasts a 14-4 career playoff record. And he has pitched the He's been the winning pitcher in 2 Game 7s of the World Series. So 14-4 overall postseason record, and been on the mound for 2 clinching win or lose the series type games. So his playoff performance theoretically, probably positions him a little more positively for the Hall of Fame, but he's going to really have to turn it up and have some big seasons, which are probably unlikely at this age. Eddie Chavera, nice solid pitcher for us, 9-10 record last year. The ERA ballooned up to 4.88. I would have to say he probably hasn't pitched as well as we hoped he would have when we picked him up. But you look at his Sierras, and they're definitely better than the ERAs that he has put up. His BABIP against him has generally been relatively high, but maybe that's just the type of pitcher he is. He has put up, between a 3.3 and a 4.5 WAR each of his 3 seasons with us. So a very solid member of the rotation. And then the newest member of the rotation is Marco Estrada, who we're really excited about. Was the team's #1 pick back in 2031. 16-4 record this year. His ERA did balloon a bit at the end to end up at 4.04 for a good part of the season. He had one of the top handful of ERAs in the American League. But really looking forward to see what he can do. You see that it still looks like he could improve his stuff in movement a bit potentially. He's got plenty of stamina, and he's a durable pitcher at this point, and he's also the only lefty in our starting rotation. So really excited to see what Marco Estrada becomes over the next few years. Our closer this past season was Santiago Suarez, 9-7 record, 38 saves, 2.78 ERA. He's going to be looking for a lot of money. We had signed him to a 1-year contract. Don't love the fact that his fastball is just so pathetic, but with that great changeup and excellent sinker, he's still been a very effective reliever over the course of his career. Just don't know. I think he's looking for about $16 million next year, so that would be expensive. But as I mentioned, we do need some help in the bullpen, so we're going to have to pay somehow to get some help in the pen, whether it is through free agency or paying through trade. Nomar Medina, guy that we claimed on waivers from the Dodgers a couple years ago, had a really nice year this year, 2.96 ERA with 96 strikeouts over 82 innings. He is also headed to free agency, so we'll see what happens there. Gabe Pryor, another free agent we signed this offseason, another potential free agent. As I mentioned, we've done a lot of 1-year contracts in the bullpen. Pretty effective lefty out of the pen, 3.12 ERA with 102 strikeouts in 83 2/3 innings pitched. Jesus Mercado is a guy who will be with us for a longer term in the bullpen. 2.50 ERA over 82 2/3 innings pitched. So he did a really nice job out of our bullpen. Should be playing a prominent role again next year when he's going to be 26. He is one of the first players that we picked up. We've talked a lot over the last couple seasons about the glut of corner outfielders that we've somehow amassed on this team. And bringing Mercado on board almost a year ago today for Israel Gutierrez, who you can see had a nice season with the Mariners, but was just kind of an excess outfielder for us. Hit 271 with 21 homers, finally being able to play in the majors. So I think that's a trade that kind of worked out for both teams. Don't love that Mercado's second pitch is not exceptional, but so far his fastball has been so good that he's been able to be a pretty productive pitcher at the major league level. Chris Rutledge, a guy we picked up in a trade with the Marlins last year, 3.53 ERA, 102 strikeouts over 91 2/3 innings pitched. He's probably going to be in our bullpen next year. He is a player that still has 3 option years left, and would love it if we improve our team enough that he can be in AAA for us next year, but tend to think he will end up on the big club. Bob Williams, he's been a reliever for us a long time. He was a 3rd-round pick back in 2026. He's a respectable arm out of the bullpen. He's durable, so he can pitch a lot of innings, although, we didn't use him all that much this past year. 4.47 ERA over 52 and a third innings. He made $2.2 million this past year, and he's expected to be, getting about 2.7 at least in arbitration. So he's starting to get to the point where he's relatively expensive for what he is, which is maybe a little bit above average bullpen arm. His big issue is that he's an extreme fly ball pitcher, doesn't have great movement, so he gives up some home runs, and we're going to be talking about that again with another player shortly. So we may have a decision to make with him. He's a little bit above replacement level, but not so much that I know that I'm sure I want to be paying him $2.7 million. Min-Ho Choi, got a decision to make on him. He's going to be making $5 million next year. On paper, he looks like he should be a really effective right-handed reliever. Excellent slider, very good fastball, solid movement, good control. But he's now, pitched 2 full seasons in the majors between his full stint with us last year, and then we traded him to Minnesota, and then we traded back for him close to the trade deadline, and he's been an average-ish kind of pitcher, not great, not horrible. Don't know that I want to be paying him $5 million, but when I look at his profile, I do think that there is potentially more there than we've seen so far. So that's another decision we'll have to make this offseason. Andrew Bonds is a player who is only up, as you can see, for 3 games. Brutal, giving up 10 runs, 5 earned, and 2 and a third innings pitched. He's kind of a replacement level type player. You can see he has been up a little bit each of the last 2 years. Does have 1 option year left, so he will probably still be on the 40-man for this coming season. But the hope is certainly that he spends the majority of the year in Omaha, and we're able to find better arms for the bullpen. And then speaking about guys who give up lots of homers, our second-round pick drafted in 2028 had high hopes that he would become an important member of our rotation. And you can see his changeup and his curve have developed to be exceptional. He's got a decent fastball. His stuff is electric. His control is acceptable. But he doesn't throw all that hard, and he doesn't have much movement on his pitches. And for Dan Keogh, that meant that he gave up a sickly 30 home runs in 97 and a third innings pitched this year. 4-5 record, started 9 games, 5.36 ERA, negative WAR last year, negative WAR this year. His stuff is insane, as you can see. He's got a 5-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio with 149 strikeouts in 97 and a third innings pitched. But the home runs are just out of control. So particularly given the fact that Estrada has developed where I think he's going to be a real effective starter for us, and that Borgman opted into that contract, we don't likely need Keogh to start for us next year, and because of the scary amount of home runs he allows, we don't really want him to be starting for us next year. So I think we're going to look to see what we can potentially get for him in trade this year. He's young. He's under team control for several more years. He's making the major league minimum. He's durable, and his stuff is insane. So maybe there's a team out there that thinks they can find some value in him and turn him around. But we are certainly going to be investigating this offseason what the options are in terms of potentially moving on from Mr. Keogh. And now we turn to the Royals' brilliant offense. And I think all you need to know about this team is that we had No huge seasons from anybody, but we had 7 players offensively who had a 3.4 WAR or better. So just a lineup and offense that just don't stop. Not a lot of easy outs. Jonathan Ojeda, one of the toughest outs in our roster. First round pick drafted in 2034. Made it to the major leagues last year where he led the AL with 51 home runs. This year he leads the AL with 115 runs, 47 homers, 109 driven in, and he got his batting average up to 270, 146 OPS plus, 142 WRC plus, and a 5.1 WAR, best on the team. Very happy to have him around as our first baseman for the foreseeable future. Angelo Vasquez, second on the team in WAR. Excellent defensive center fielder with just off-the-chart range, great personality. A bit of a down year for him offensively, hit just 272, did steal 28 bases, have 32 doubles, but had a lot less hits, a lot less runs scored than previous seasons, and his batting average was also as low as it's ever been. So he was actually a bit below average offensively in terms of his OPS plus and WRC plus, but still put up that really positive WAR, thanks in a large part to his defense. Victor Aveyar, who was the American League Rookie of the Year back in 2034 when he led the league with 135 runs driven in, had a nice bounce-back season after a bit of a disappointing sophomore year. 293 batting average, 37 homers, 103 driven in, 144 OPS plus, 142 WRC plus. Probably has some of the best pure power on our team. Javi Medina, left fielder, second full season in the majors, and it was a real special one. 286 batting average, 35 homers, 109 runs driven in. Made his first All-Star team this year and was also the MVP of the ALCS. Ernesto Laziosi, a nice bounce-back season for the second baseman. Got his batting average back up to 287 after hitting just 211 in an injury-plagued 2035 season. Also 11 home runs, a positive offensive player and a positive WAR this season after a negative WAR last year. Always going to be difficult to keep him healthy, which is a theme, we'll see in some of our other infielders. But still happy to have him around for another few seasons. We haven't been able to figure out a longer-term contract with Laziosi, so he's going to be headed to arbitration again this offseason, where he's expected to make about $5.5 million, but still have an opportunity to hopefully lock him up for the long term at some point in the next few years. Alex Vasquez, who might be, our most talented offensive player, had what I guess is a down year for him, hitting just 267, which is the lowest average of his career. But he still had 40 doubles, still scored 100 runs, 34 homers, 108 driven in, 134 OPS plus, 131 WRC plus. Not going to put up the same type of WAR as some of the other people because he's a corner outfielder who usually plays left field and doesn't have great range, so he's not adding any value probably defensively, but is really checking in on him. Actually, he was not on our 2027 World Series team. I guess he came up much later than that. 2029, and end of the 2029 season is when he first came up. So I think at this point with Bobby Witt Jr. gone, Caleb Loggerwell is the only guy we have left who's been on all 5 of those championship teams. You can see that Vasquez just turned 30 years old during the postseason. Already has 220 home runs, 769 runs driven in. Certainly seems like someone who could be on his way to some pretty special offensive numbers before his career is over. And then the last of the players with WARs above 3 is our starting shortstop, Tony Fonseca. He is a player who we're able to sign to an extension last offseason, so we've got him locked up until his early 30s. Very good defensive player. His range has actually regressed a little bit over the last couple of years, which is not great. But still with that incredible error rating, arm rating, and turn double play rating, still a very good shortstop and would be an exceptional third baseman or second baseman. Hit 259 this year, 9 home runs. If his OPS plus and WRC plus are anywhere in that, mid 90s, he's going to be a very valuable player for us with that excellent glove. And also love the durability, love that we know he's going to be out there playing a fine defensive shortstop for us, 150 plus games a year as long as he stays healthy. Our starting catcher, Angelo Bolden, put up a 2.1 WAR, was named to the All-Star team for the third time in his career, 255 batting average, 9 home runs, pretty solid defensive catcher. Mike Mcneil is a guy we may look to move on from. Didn't get really regular playing time this year in his first full season in the majors. You can see he started just 67 games, had 290 at-bats, did hit 266 with 14 home runs. Certainly profiles as an above-average offensive player. He's got the versatility to play left field or right field. But he's kind of our fifth outfielder at this point behind Vasquez in center, Aveyar in right, Medina in left, and then Vasquez, who's also kind of a left fielder / DH. And then he's also behind Jorge Lebron, who's a younger player for us, but the one that we're probably going to want up next year rather than Mcneil. So Mcneil, along with Dan Keogh, I think are the two players that we may look to see what we can pick up for in trade this offseason. They're both in their mid-20s. They're both still on major league minimum type contracts under team control for another few seasons. So hopefully there's some value in those two players, and we might be able to get someone to help rebuild our rotation, or not so much our rotation, but rebuild our bullpen with guys like that. Willie Flores, similar to Argento Laziosi, is a fragile player. And he's kind of the contrast to Laziosi. He had a really nice year and was relatively healthy last season. Regressed this year to a 255 batting average and played just 71 games as he was banged up a lot. Was still a positive player offensively as far as his OPS plus at least. And you can see he's a very versatile defensive player. Doesn't have the greatest range in the world, so he's likely to be our starting third baseman. I think Laziosi will probably be our second baseman. With Bobby Witt Jr. gone, Flores will take over every day at third. I think in a perfect world, given that both Laziosi and Flores are fragile, we'd love to kind of have one of them in a super utility role, given that Ojeda should be starting at first every day and Fonseca should be starting at shortstop. But we obviously just won the World Series with those guys both in the starting lineup, when they were healthy. I don't want to get too greedy. We've got the best offense in baseball right now, but I think that improving, potentially our second baseman or third baseman, or if we don't improve those positions, I think improving our bench strength as far as our infield is a potential goal for next year, because right now Billy Dominguez, who hit 250 and 176 at-bats, and Rich Alvarado, who hit 271 and 140 at-bats, would be our backup utility infielders. The issue is that neither one of them is really all that brilliant defensively. You can see Alvarado plays first and second, and he's 5'11", so you don't love playing him at first. And he's only got 50 range and error rating, so you don't love playing him at second. Billy Dominguez is a little more versatile defensively, can play second, third, and short in a pinch, but his ratings aren't all that great defensively either. So would love it if we could find someone who's a little better defensively with a little better bat than both Dominguez and Alvarado to potentially be our top utility infielder next year, and someone who could potentially play second for Laziosi or third for Flores when one or both of those players is inevitably injured next year. And last but not least, our backup catcher, Adam Fuchs, picked him up in a trade with Miami. And he started the season in AAA for us. And then when we lost Angelo Bolden to injury, we had both Fuchs and our previous backup catcher, Leo Aveyar, up. And when Bolden was finally healthy, we kind of thought that Fuchs was a little bit of a better player than Aveyar. Aveyar still had some options, so we sent Aveyar down to AAA. Fuchs hit just .239 for us, only one home run and 113 at-bats. But you can see he's a very solid defensive catcher, good personality, durable, not a bad guy to have as a backup catcher. And we still have the other backup catcher, Leo Aveyar, in the system, and both of those guys still have one option year left. So I think with those two plus Bolden, we are in pretty good shape at catcher for next year. And I did mention Jorge Lebron, who we brought up at the end of the season, spent most of the year in AAA, where he hit .307 with 20 home runs. Did not hit much at the major league level this year. .216 batting average in no home runs and 111 at-bats. He certainly profiles as someone who should be a pretty effective offensive player, has excellent speed on the base paths, can play both corner outfield spots, and you can play him at center if you have to. He's a durable player. So kind of for our fifth outfield spot next season, leaning towards potentially having LeBron in that role, and as I said, potentially moving on from Mike Mcneil. But given the glut of corner outfielders we have, we may have another decision just a year from now. Bobby Cintrone was our international free agent signing back in 2029. Had an injury-plagued season this year, but he hit .289 with 8 homers and 187 at-bats in AA, and then we moved him up to AAA towards the end of the year, where he hit .353 and 34 at-bats. Still has some improvement to make as a player, but a very versatile defensive player who can play any outfield position for us. And you see, looking at these ratings, he's got that excellent range. So you could play him anywhere in the infield. You wouldn't feel great about playing him at any position. Doesn't have a great error or arm rating, so you wouldn't love him at short. You wouldn't love him at second. You wouldn't love him at third. But he could play at any of those positions. So he's a guy who should be up with the team by the end of next season, which again could mean that we're going to need to move on from another corner outfielder. The thing with Cintrone, though, is, he really could be a super utility guy for us. Again, I don't love playing him at those infield positions, but given the bat that I think he's going to have, we certainly could. Unfortunately, he's another guy who's already fragile, so it's not going to really fix the issues we have with the health of Laziosi and Flores, but it does just demonstrate, if I could speak, that we absolutely can afford to get rid of someone like Mike Mcneil this offseason, because we're probably still going to have too many, potential corner outfielders next year at this time too, and maybe looking to need to trade away a Victor Aveyar or a Jorge Lebron a year from now to make room potentially for a Bobby Cintrone. So as this offseason begins, as I mentioned, we've got a lot of money to spend, and we don't have a ton of holes to fill. Offensively, everyday players, as I said, a utility infielder who's got a nice glove and a decent bat could be someone who could upgrade us from Alvarado or Dominguez as our backup infielders. That's one need. Don't need any help in the outfield. If there was, a Johnny Bench type catcher, we'd certainly love to have him. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with our backstops. So as far as the everyday players, we had the best offense in the American League. Only thing I think we might want to add is, as I said, a really good utility infielder if we can find one out there. And it's really going to be focused on the pitching staff. Obviously, I will take another top starter if we can find one. Probably not going to be someone we'd want available as a free agent. And it's probably going to be an egregious price if we try to trade for a frontline starter. And it's not a huge need with the 5 guys we have for next year, although Borgman's health is certainly an issue. So I think focusing on bringing in a lot of high-quality bullpen arms, and then, as I mentioned, maybe a utility infielder is kind of going to be the focus of this coming off season. And when we look at the potential free agents, as far as the batters, there's, O'Neill Cruz, a first baseman, who we absolutely don't need, even though he's a very good bat. You can see he's led the National League in runs 2 of the last 3 years. A lot of hardware that he's earned over the course of his career, but don't need help there. Don't need Juan Soto as a corner outfielder. Yerald Nin at second base would be someone nice to add because he does have a good glove, decent bat at this point. But he's 31 years old, he's fragile, and he's going to be looking for about $30 million. I don't think that that's going to be the most well-spent money. So you look at the top potential free agents offensively, and I just don't think there's anything that exciting for us to chase after. Turn and look to the pitchers, and there's a lot of decent relievers out there, not a ton of starters. It's just going to be a matter of how much money we're willing to pay for some of these players. Santiago Suarez, our current closer, looking for about $16 million. Gabe Pryor, left-handed reliever on our team, looking for about $6 million after we paid him $1.3 million on that one-year deal. Felipe Tejada, who was our closer a season ago, looking for close to $14 million. So there are some nice pitchers who are potentially going to be out there, but they're going to cost us some money. Even Nomar Medina, on our team this year is looking for over $10 million as a reliever next year. So we've got money to spend, but I don't want to waste it. So hopefully, particularly if we look to trade away the likes of Keogh, Mcneil, and others, we'll be able to add some help for the bullpen. And in a perfect world, the starting rotation by maybe trading away some of those guys in the coming weeks and months. And as I mentioned, with all of the one-year contracts that we've been signing, we've got 4 potential free agents, and they're all pitchers. Bryce Hubbard, we're probably finally going to move on from. He's been with us since we traded for him in 2024 in our system. You can see he split last year between Omaha and Kansas City. He was reasonably effective. He's a left-hander, but he's 35 years old. He's fragile at this point. Certainly profiles is an average-ish major league arm. He also doesn't have the best personality, and we don't typically spend tons of time worrying about how everyone on our team is getting along. But when we do look at team chemistry, and we don't see this now because he didn't actually make the playoff roster, but he's kind of the only selfish player on our team. I just don't think it's worth it for the drama with him at this point, and the fact that he's also going to be looking for a decent amount of money. You can see $1.5 million, so that's less than actually the last time I looked. So not a ton of money, but as I mentioned, when he is on the major league roster, kind of shows up as a selfish player. But I guess given that he spent half the year down in the minors this year, his salary request is lower. Medina, solid arm, but it's not a $10 million for 3-year arm as far as I'm concerned. Gabe Pryor, I'm more intrigued by. $6 million is a ton for a reliever. Love the personality, love the profile, and really love the production he had with us. I am a little concerned, though, that his second pitch is only average, and then his curveball and his changeup are both a disaster. He is a bit more effective against lefties than righties. If we could have a guy like him for $2 or $3 million as a lefty specialist, I'd be interested in it. But $6 million, I'm willing to kind of let him go to free agency. And then Suarez, he's looking for, I believe, he's down to $14 million. Suarez, I almost think I might make an offer to. He's been a pretty effective relief pitcher over the course of his career. 31-year-old with a career 160 ERA plus, 71 FIP minus. He's durable. I know that $14 million a year is a lot for a reliever, particularly for a team like Kansas City. But you have to remember, over the course of this playthrough, we've turned Kansas City from a small market team into, without a doubt, a middle market team as far as our budget and player payroll. So we can probably afford to splurge on him. And as we looked at a few minutes ago, you look at the potential upcoming free agents, and Suarez is right at the top of the list. He's durable. You can argue that Trent Jones is better, but he's wrecked physically already. He's older, and he's coming off of a ruptured tendon in his finger. For similar money, I feel a lot better bringing Santiago Suarez back. So given that the free agent situation doesn't look incredible, I am actually going to make an offer to Suarez. I know some of you are screaming at me right now, how can you pay a reliever so much? Well, I'm not going to offer him the full $14 million. I'm not going to include the no trade clause. I'm going to make this deal a lot less attractive to him and see if he's still willing to sign it. So we're going to offer Suarez an average of just $12 million a year over the next 3 seasons with a team option for the final year. We're not going to include a no trade clause. We will bump up the bonus for an all-star selection to him. This will actually be a salary cut from the $12.5 million he made for us this past year on a 1-year deal. It'll definitely be more security for him. I don't think he'll go for it, but I'm willing to put it out there. And he's actually willing to think about it. So if we can get him locked up 3 years, $36 million, team option in case things go bad for that final season, and we're paying him less per year than we spent on him this past year, given that he was pretty effective for us, would not mind investing that money in Suarez and potentially fixing one of the many potential holes we have in our bullpen for next year. So thinking about the 4 free agent pitchers, I think Suarez is the only one that we're going to make an offer to. At the $1.5 million-ish money, I would have considered Hubbard, but he's got no option years left as of next year. So I'd prefer that he be a minor leaguer for us if we had him back, and given that we'd have to clear him through waivers to get him down there, just not worth it from my perspective. And given that we're not going to bring back Hubbard, I think I'm leaning towards making an offer to Bob Williams, probably being unnecessary loyal to him. When I look at his career pitching stats, he's been a bit above average when you look at his career stats, but he's coming off one of the weaker seasons of his career. But his Sierra last year was 2.57. He is durable. He's supposedly going to make about $2.7 million. He's probably going to be looking for more than that. We're not even going to offer him that. He's looking for $3 million. If we can get him signed for $2.5 million or a little more, I'd bring him back for 1 more year. Says that 2.5 isn't exactly what he's looking for. How about 2.55? Oof. I don't see myself going more than 2.6 for him, so I hope he agrees to think about that, and he does. So he's a back-end arm for the bullpen, but we know what we've got with him. He is durable. I don't love him, but I don't hate him either, and it's not a ton of money. So if we can bring him back at $2.6 million, we're still going to have several holes to fill in the bullpen. So we need some kind of, replacement level kind of arms out there back in the 11th, 12th, 13th spots in the bullpen, which is likely where Williams will be. Maybe I could find someone cheaper. I actually probably almost certainly could find someone cheaper, but sometimes I like to go with the guy that we know, and we'll at least try to bring Williams back for next season. Leo Aveyar at $1.6 million that he's looking for is getting a little pricey for a backup catcher, especially given that, as I mentioned, we did end up sending him down to Omaha where he spent most of the season. I do like his ability. His arm isn't great, but he still has one option year left. So I'd prefer to pay him less than the $1.45 million that he made this year, given that it's very conceivable that he ends up spending most of the year at AAA if both Bolden is healthy and we decide to put Fuchs on the Major League roster instead of Aveyar coming out of spring training. But I like the optionality of having three players who can be Major League catchers around. You see, he's not interested in even discussing it right now, so we'll just have to make an arbitration offer to him. He's angry about the fact that he's down in the minors, which I can understand. But unfortunately for you, Leo, we still control your rights. So we are going to offer him $1.55 million, which is actually a bit of a raise, and hope that wins if we do end up going to arbitration with him. Rich Alvarado looking for a modest, actually a decent raise. He made 1.15 last year, supposedly looking for about 2.1 million. As we've talked about, would potentially like to move on from him or Dominguez. I think that Alvarado is a better bat, so I'm inclined to make an offer to him. He says he's looking for 2.3 million. We'll see if we can get him for 1.85 million for 1 year. It's not the salary that you were expecting. Yeah, a lot of us don't get the salary that we're expecting, Rich. I don't see him being a $2 million a year player. I hope 1.95 he goes for. Nope. All right, he'll consider $2 million a year. If we do end up signing another utility infielder, or if we end up trading for a utility infielder, even at $2 million, it shouldn't be too hard to get out from under that Alvarado contract. I think we could get somebody decent in return. So that doesn't bother me at all. Laziosi, controversial player, I know, with some of the frequent viewers and commenters because of his fragility and really his volatility. You look at his career with us. Almost won a batting title as a rookie when he hit 313, dropped to 258, dropped to 211, and then bounced back this year to a 287 batting average. You can almost guarantee that he ends up spending some time on the IL. That meant that his ARB number this past year was only $1.5 million, which was pretty good production for what we got, or pretty reasonable for the good production we got from him. But now he's looking for a pretty good bump up to $5.5 million. And he doesn't really seem to want to be talking long term. We'll throw a $5 million number out there initially. That's not going to be enough to get it done. We'll throw out 5.2 and see what he thinks about that. He's willing to think about it. how about 5.3 million for next year, Argueto, and he will think about that. It's possible, that we look to move on from Laziosi and or Alvarado and or Flores, among all of those kind of similarly aged middle infielders who have all been up since they joined the team full-time 4 years ago, along with shortstop Tony Fonseca, who we do have signed to a longer-term deal. But these guys have value. If we decide that we make some moves, make some trades, make some free agent signings, and we don't have room for these guys, we should be able to get something decent in return. Willie Flores, who, as I talked about, is probably now our starting third baseman with Witt Jr. retired. And he's willing to talk long-term with us now, which is interesting. I don't know if he's close to a $15 million a year player. You look at the batting stats over the course of his career, 98 OPS plus, 97 WRC plus. He's kind of an average-ish offensive player by those measures. Over each 162 games, he's put up about a 2.0 WAR. So with his respectable bat and his versatile and good defense, he's better than a replacement level player. But I don't want to say that on a great team he's a super utility guy, because he is on a great team that has won 3 straight championships, and he's been a starter for us when he's been healthy for most of those seasons. So he certainly is. He certainly is an everyday player. I don't know if he's a $14 million a year player, though, especially given how fragile he is and the fact that the bat is average-ish. And the defensive versatility is great. He's not almost better in the outfield. He is better in the outfield. He's a very good defensive center fielder, a great defensive right fielder or left fielder. Whereas because of the range that he has, he's an excellent third baseman. And you could play him at second or short, but you generally would want better range out there. I can talk myself in either direction on Willie Flores. I've got to give that a little bit more thought. I don't think I want to be paying him $14.5 million a year. I will say that. Victor Aveyar, who's off to a really nice start in his career, going to be 28 years old next year. 14th round draft pick who's developed into a very effective offensive player, as you can see. He theoretically is another guy that we could be moving on from over the next couple of years as he starts making more and more money. But his number for next year, should be in the low 5s. He's going to want more than that, I'm sure. 5.8. We'll see if we can get him for 5.1 million next year. He's willing to think about that, which is great. So Aveyar at around 5.1 million next year, if he does sign, is really good value for us. But thinking about where his salary is going to go over the next few years, could be close to $9 million in 2038 and then about 11 in 2039, given that we've got Angelo Vasquez wrapped up at pretty respectable money in center field, and then Alex Vasquez with Witt Jr. gone, now locked up for the most money of anyone on our team. It may make sense in the next year or two to move on from Aveyar before he starts making really stupid money, and give the opportunities in the outfield to the Bobby Cintrones or the Jorge Lebrons of the world, who are going to be more cost effective over the next few seasons. So not a move that we have to make right away, but it's certainly conceivable that even if we trade away Mcneil this year, that this could still be Aveyar's last year with the team, because if he starts making good money, we'll have to see what our salary situation looks like. Who knows who we're going to sign this offseason. But at some point, it'll probably start to make sense again for these Royals to go with more cost-effective players, even though we've got more money to spend right now than I could ever imagine for a Royals franchise. And as I think about Willie Flores, his arbitration numbers the next 2 years right now are expected to be about $6 million and about $8 million. He's looking for big time money. He's given us maybe a little bit of a discount this year, but then we're paying him almost $2 million above his potential arbitration number next season. And then we're paying him $14.5 million a year. He's a really good player, but I don't know if he's a $15 million a year player. He probably is on the open market. I can't offer him that kind of money. We're going to make him an offer that's probably going to make him angry, in which case we'll get him signed for next season, and then we'll deal with the long-term ramifications in a year from now when he's still going to be arbitration eligible. All right, so Flores was looking for 8 years at an average of almost $12.9 million a year. We're offering him the 8 years, but an average of only $10.5 million a year. Now, we are giving him a lot more this upcoming season than he would normally be expected to get, so maybe he'll like having that extra money in his pocket. I really struggle with this because he's 26 years old and he's already fragile, and he's been fragile for a few years. I think even if he signs this contract, it's one that we could come back to regret if he becomes a wrecked player physically who's not that good offensively and really becomes a $10, $11, $12 million mediocre utility infielder for us. But if he doesn't get wrecked physically, I love his defensive versatility, and his bat is respectable. I'm going to at least see what he thinks about this offer. But I'm saying this right now, and I know a lot of times I change my mind after I press the button and see what happens. If he does not accept this offer, I am not going to offer him more for a long-term deal. This is the only long-term deal that we're offering him right now. If he doesn't accept this, we're just getting him signed for next year. Yeah, he's looking for even more money now. 5 years at an average of $12.5 million. I guess the average is a little lower, but because it's a shorter contract, he wants over $15 million a year for those free agent years. So we are not going to re-engage on that. His ARB number is expected to be about $6 million. We're just going to go ahead and offer him 1 year at that $5.8 million and see if he'll go for that. And he's willing to think about it. So maybe we dodged a bullet there, but with both Flores and Laziosi, and for that matter, also with Alvarado, they're going to be arbitration eligible again next year. We can always try to re-engage if we decide we want to sign any of them to long-term deals. So we're going to see what happens with these offers. To all of our arbitration eligible players, it looks like Aveyar will actually go through arbitration, and then to Santiago Suarez, our potential closer again for next year. And it's time to see what we can potentially get for Dan Keogh and Mike Mcneil. So we're going to look for what we can get in terms of a pitcher for them, in terms of prospects or regulars. I guess we'll look at veterans too. I'd prefer someone a little more cost effective, but if someone's willing to offer us a really big time veteran, we do have money to potentially take on a contract. So we need some arms for the bullpen, particularly if we're letting the relatively young reliever Keogh go. Hopefully between him and Mcneil, they're 25 years old. They're both potentially solid major leaguers, although as we've talked about, I have my concerns about Keogh's level of production. Yeah, you can see there's a lot of players to think about. We're potentially giving up a lot with those two good solid players, but I'm going to spend a little time going through these lists and figuring out if perhaps there's a trade we can make to bring a big time arm into our bullpen and clear a little bit of the log jam in the corner outfield and clear out a player who we thought was going to have a big role on our team, but I just don't think does at this point. I guess the other thing that I should think about looking at, though, is you can see the kind of players we can get for them in a package. Looks like we can absolutely get, this is very rough, obviously. I need to go in and see what these players actually look like. But looks like we can get a 3 to 3.5 star overall and potential player for the two of them together. If we look at Keogh just alone, I'd like to kind of know what that looks like. And there's still, 3.5 star potential players for Keogh alone. I'm actually going to look at if I can find where he is on the list, Mike Mcneil alone, and just see what we can potentially get for him alone also in terms of pitchers. And it looks like kind of a similar situation. So it doesn't look like we necessarily need to package the two of them together. I think, going one at a time, we can probably get what we need. It doesn't look like, and again, obviously, if we start putting a deal together, we can probably get them to add more people in, but may try to shop them separately and see what we can get for Mcneil straight up and then see what we can get for Keogh straight up. And there are definitely some interesting pitchers that we can pick up if we do trade away Mike Mcneil. From the Nationals, Sergio Masui, going to be 28 years old next year, good personality. He is a potential starter, but I think he's much more effective in the pen, and that's where Washington has had him. Has been a reasonably effective pitcher over the course of his young career. Pitching out of the bullpen, he could be a nice, solid right-handed arm. He was an all-star in 2035 for the Nationals. So he's one of the interesting players that's out there. Another one that attracted my attention a little bit is Dylan Lonergan. He's older. He's 32 years old, and he's making big money, almost $14 million a year. But he's a major league starter. He's fragile, which I don't love. But over the course of his major league career, he's been an above-average major league pitcher. He's not a front-of-the-rotation kind of guy, but with Borgman being injury-prone and in his last year with us, having a guy like Lonergan signed for the next few years, not a horrible number, gives us a really good back end of the rotation starter. He can definitely be a third or fourth starter on a really good team, which is what we are. So he's intriguing, particularly given that we've got money to take on some contracts. Couple other guys that stood out a little bit: Elijah Corsi from the Pirates. Just like the fact that he's young, probably the youngest guy that we're interested in, going to be turning 25 before next season. Has not been good at the major league level at this point, as you can see, but certainly profiles is a potentially useful major league arm. And then last but not least, if I can remember who I was looking at going through this massive list, there was, I think it was it Jose Arias? Yeah, Jose Arias was another one, 26-year-old starter with the Astros. He's fragile, but certainly has the stamina to start, has a 4-pitch arsenal, really nice stuff, or acceptable stuff, good control. Movement, a potential issue, but he throws harder than Keogh, and his movement is better than Keogh. He's definitely been a below-average pitcher over the course of his major league career, but he's also relatively young. So he was another one that stood out to me as someone to at least consider. So those are the kind of pitchers we can get straight up just for Mike Mcneil right now. One other I saw, Michael Fulgham, you may remember, we tried to pick him up on waivers from the Dodgers last year, and apparently the Cubs claimed him before we could. We ended up facing him 3 straight games in the World Series, as you can see there. But, like his profile also, another guy who could start if we had it to, I think would be a really good arm out of the bullpen. So, Fulgham is another guy who we could potentially look to trade for. So there are definitely useful bullpen arms in some people who are borderline starters who are available if we trade Mike Mcneil straight up. The thing that I'm going to do before we start trading these guys one-off or as a package is I want to, since I have no more shop attempts today, I can probably move on to tomorrow. But before I do that, I do want to do a player search and just kind of take a look at any rock star potential pitchers that are out there and see what it would take to pick up a pitcher like that. With a deal centered around both Mike Mcneil and Dan Keogh. There may be an opportunity for us to get somebody even better, like one of these pitchers listed here, who are some of the premier pitchers in baseball. We'll probably have to add in more. We'll certainly have to add in more than just those 2 players. But if we can add a real frontline pitcher to our team, it might still be worthwhile to see if we can package Keogh and Mcneil, maybe along with a couple other prospects for someone who's a true difference maker. So going to spend a little time investigating that option right now. And I knew it was probably getting a little greedy with this, but if you look at Alex Rojas of the Blue Jays, who is one of the top young pitchers in baseball, 27 years old, he's already won a Cy Young Award and was an All-Star back in 2035. He's durable. He's signed for the long term, and he's going to be making, certainly big money down the line. But even if we include both Keogh and Mcneil, we still can't get a deal, even if we throw in. There's no one else that we can throw in to get a deal done. Kind of just looking at our top prospects. If we throw in center fielder Gilberto Romero, number 48 prospect in baseball, was our international free agent signing a couple years ago. If we throw him in with those 2 players, there's still nobody who makes it work. If we throw in Rick Mesa, who was our number 1 pick last season, number 61 prospect in baseball, good-looking pitching prospect for us. We throw him in also, and we still can't get a deal done with anyone else in our organization. So, not surprisingly, the price for one of the top young starters in the game in Rojas appears to be prohibitive, which is exactly what we'd expect. But still kind of wanted to check in on players like him and Victor Alfaro and just make sure that there wasn't anything out there that we could do centered around Keogh and Mcneil. And there are actually a couple younger pitchers we might be able to build something around. The big-time starters, these were no-goes, as you might expect. Teams were looking for insane amounts of money. But Alex Castro from the Diamondbacks wants to be a starter. He's not a starter, but he's going to be 25 years old next season. Right-hander with a good personality. Profiles is a pretty solid reliever, and he's been good when he's been up in the majors. He's a little more expensive than the other guy we're thinking about, Kyle Smith, who's also 24 years old, but is going to be 24 years old for most of next season. He's almost a full year younger. He's a pure reliever, but his pitching profile is really attractive, and we're very high scouting accuracy on him. The OSA is not quite as high on him, but he's got an arsenal of 5 pitches. He's purely a reliever when you look at his stamina. Really nice stuff, potentially crazy movement, good enough control. He's a ground ball pitcher who throws in the low to mid 90s. He hasn't been good in the majors. In fact, he's been pretty bad in the majors with an 80 ERA plus. I mean, I guess his 92 FIP minus is decent, and he still put up a 1.6 WAR. But he's a little less costly than Castro, because Castro theoretically can start. I wouldn't love starting him with that third pitch being a changeup, but I do like the fact that he's durable. But Kyle Smith, when you look at trading for him, if you put Mcneil into the deal, we're not all that far apart. And if we add Keogh, the deal is done. Now, theoretically, I'd like to give up something less valuable than Keogh, and then potentially use somebody like Keogh to maybe also go after an Alex Castro. But you can see that, if you start the deal for Alex Castro with Mike Mcneil, we get a "you must be joking," and we'd have to throw in Bobby Cintrone to get it done. But if you put Mcneil together with Keogh, we still got to add in a pretty good time player. Now, we would probably, among these players, happily throw in third baseman Jorge Morales, who looks like he could be a useful major league player, but he's 21, soon to be 22 years old, and we still have him down in rookie ball. But given that I don't really think I'd want to use Castro as a starter, because that third pitch is just kind of meh at best, and we'd have to give up so much more to get him done, I think I'm kind of inclined to try to get something centered around Kyle Smith, who's almost a year younger. He hasn't been as effective at the major league level, as I said, but his profile is just ridiculous. And we're not going to start him, so he's going to be even more ridiculous coming out of the pen. Now, granted, you can say he put up a 6.61 ERA coming out of the pen for the Braves this year, but that was at 23 years old, and it's only over 31 and a third innings pitched. You look at his Sierra of 3.57, and you look at his BABIP of 367 against him, and he had a 336 BABIP against him in 2035. So is he just a pitcher that people are going to tee off against, or has he gotten unlucky? For somebody like Mcneil, that I don't think is a big part of our organization going forward, I'm willing to take a gamble on Kyle Smith. So I'm going to see if I can piece something together. You can see right now, they're looking for pretty valuable prospects or valuable players in combination with Mcneil. But if I can come up with a package of kind of secondary prospects in addition to Mcneil, that would get the deal done for Kyle Smith, I think I'll think about doing it. And actually, as I kind of tore through this list of players who would make the deal work, there were a bunch of them that were no-goes. And then there was one player who I didn't really even recognize that much, who is Arturo Cardoso, who's a minor league free agent we signed just before this season. He's wrecked physically. He certainly profiles as a back-end major league starter, given that we've got a real good team. We had him in Omaha this year, but this is a guy that we picked up for nothing. If he can get the deal done along with Mike Mcneil to get us Kyle Smith, this is a young bullpen arm that I think has a lot of potential. And again, if I look at his pitching stats, not all that exciting, but I really like this profile for this reliever. And as I've talked about, we need to move on from Mcneil to open up a spot next year for LeBron. And Cardoso is just a throw-in for us at this point. Now, being greedy, I'm going to see if they'll give us another player for the minor leagues, just even if it's organizational filler. So I'm not going to just hit complete trade yet. If we can get something else back in return, we'll do it. But I think Kyle Smith is going to be a reliever for us next year, and hopefully for many years after that. Kind of torn here because I think this is a good deal if we just do it straight up. But Jaden Jackson, who's a 24-year-old starting pitching prospect, he's got a great personality. He's not really a major league starter. He's a 4A kind of pitcher, but he's durable. He'd be good organizational depth. He's got 3 option years left. And we're close to being able to get a contract done with him. Or a deal done if we include him, but we still have to throw someone else who's pretty decent back in return, and I just don't know if it's worth messing around and risking that if we don't get Kyle Smith now, all of a sudden Cardoso isn't going to be good enough. So as much as I'd love to have someone like Jaden Jackson thrown in, I don't think he's ever going to be a huge pitcher at the major league level. So we'll get a little less greedy in terms of the prospect we try to get. And we've expanded the deal a bit. Obviously, from what we're giving up, centers around Mike Mcneil, who looks like he's going to be a pretty good offensive corner outfielder. He's got 537 at-bats in the majors at this point. And he's hit 30 homers with 86 runs driven in and a 264 batting average, 119 OPS plus, 118 WRC plus, and 2.6 WAR. So he's a pretty useful player. They're also getting Cardoso, who we talked about, and then we have to throw in third baseman Danny Silva, who's was a 4th-round pick back in 2031, hasn't made it above A ball. Certainly profiles as a below-average-ish major league hitter who doesn't really have an offensive position. And we're able, in return for him, to get Gregorio Cutiero, who's got a nice personality. Also don't think he's really a major league hitter, but I think he potentially is a little bit better. Only 22 years old. Hasn't played above rookie ball, but a little bit better personality, a little more respectable defensively just because he's got better range. I don't think he's a big-time player, but he's a better personality for our minor league system. And obviously the main goal is to get Kyle Smith to join our bullpen. So we are going to go ahead and bid adieu to Mike Mcneil as well as Cardoso and Silva and bring on Kyle Smith as well as Cucchiero. And the trade is complete. So now with Mcneil gone, the question is what can we get for Dan Keogh? So we're going to spend a little time investigating what we can get at this point for Dan Keogh. Feel pretty good that we've got Smith to bolster our bullpen. Still waiting to potentially hear back from Suarez, who was our closer last year on the free agent, or I guess he's not technically a free agent yet, but on the extension that we offered him. But going to spend a little time seeing what we can get for Keogh now as we try to revamp our bullpen in the early days of this offseason. And the offers for Dan Keogh aren't great. I think the one that I'm most interested in potentially is Melvin Vasquez from the Orioles. He wants to be a starter. He's not a starter. He's got the stamina to be a starter. But that third pitch being a 40 changeup just doesn't work. So he's a bullpen arm. He's a lefty, which we need. And he's a little more effective against left-handed batters than he is against right-handed batters, so kind of serves the purpose of having a lefty. He's not a great arm, but I think he's a slightly above average arm out of the bullpen if you use him as a lefty, if you use him as a reliever. You can see he's been a below average pitcher over the course of his career at the major league level. But he's also spent a lot of that time starting. And, the second worst season he had in terms of his FIP and his ERA plus was the year that he started 28 games for the Royals, which was last season. So I feel like he's a respectable major league arm. He's also a ground ball pitcher who throws in the mid to high 90s. So probably not going to have the same kind of home run issues that Keogh does. And certainly you look, Keogh gave up 30 home runs in about the same number of innings as Vasquez pitched last year. Vasquez gave up just 11. But I don't love him. So I'm actually not going to deal Keogh right away. It's only October 28th. We've got a long off season ahead of us for us to kind of figure out exactly what we need with this team. Maybe things will develop and we'll want to trade Keogh away for a middle infielder. So I feel good that we've added one nice reliever with Smith in the trade that got rid of Mcneil. But I don't feel like I have to rush anything right now. Keogh's only 25 years old, and he's only been up in the majors for a little over a season. I think there still will be teams that are intrigued by his potential. So don't feel that we have to dump him or that his value is going to all of a sudden change materially over the next few months. And here on October 30th, we're starting to get some of our arbitration-eligible players signed. Arrighetto Laziosi signed the one-year deal. We've also made offers to a bunch of our minor league free agents, so we're re-signing a bunch of them. Santiago Suarez going to be back as our closer. The fans are excited by that. I think we got a pretty good deal with him. Victor Aveyar back. Rich Alvarado back. Bob Williams back. And Willie Flores also back. Didn't get him signed for the long term, but he will be back. You can see a bunch more free agents. Trying to get some of our coaches signed also. So things are good. We're going to have less money to spend now with Suarez locked up, as you can see, but with Suarez as our closer and the trade of Mcneil for Smith, I think we've already added two pretty important arms to our bullpen, and it's still not even November. So with the exception of Aveyar, who didn't want to talk extension with us because he's angry he's down in AAA, we've got all of our arbitration-eligible players signed. We'll go to arbitration with Aveyar and see what happens. Gabe Pryor is the last one to think about. Great personality. Left-handed arm, which we really need right now. He's fragile, and he's looking for pretty big money. I don't want to be giving him $6 million a year for 4 years, but we really, looking at the potential left-handers who are going to be available as free agents, there's just not a lot out there. Obviously, we can still try to do something with trade, like we were thinking about with Keogh, but we've got the money to spend. As I said, I don't want to give him $6 million a year, and I'm also not going to guarantee him a spot in the starting rotation. But if we can get Keogh signed for a few years for a more reasonable amount, we'll definitely think of that. We'll definitely consider that. And we've got an offer for Keogh averaging $4.875 million a year for 4 years instead of the $6 million that he's looking for. We've got a team option in the final year, which he didn't have in his contract, and we're not guaranteeing him that he's going to be a starter. So we'll see what he thinks of it. And he's willing to think about it. So if we can bring Keogh back to the pen for less than $5 million a year and an option to get out after 3 years, probably overpaying a little bit, but just taking a look at the landscape, there's not a lot of good left-handed relievers that are available out there, and it's an area that we definitely need to ensure we've got some major league quality arms who are lefties next year, and Pryor would definitely help with that. And we did get Gabe Pryor re-signed, so that is positive. One big left-handed arm in the bullpen who will be guaranteed to have back next year. So glad to have him on board. Probably overpaid a little bit, but I think he was going to be even more expensive if we let him hit free agency. And I think he was the best left-handed bullpen arm that was going to be out there. So glad to have him locked up without having to fight for him on the open market. And the Gold Gloves came out today. A couple of Gold Glove winners. Bryce Hillman had a nice year for us as a starter. Wins his second Gold Glove, his first in the American League, and his first with the Royals. And Angelo Vasquez, we've talked about his wonderful glove out there for many years now. But finally, for the first time in his career, he's the AL Gold Glove winner in center field. So a couple of Gold Glove awards for the Kansas City defense here on the opening day of 2036 award season. And another bunch of awards announced. Looking at the Silver Sluggers, probably not a shock that Jonathan Ojeda won at first base. Looks like he is the only Silver Slugger for the Royals this year. So was an all-star for the first time this season, and also a Silver Slugger for the first time this season for the excellent young right fielder from Orange, New Jersey. And in the least shocking news, manager Bobby Crosby, Manager of the Year award. You can see he has been manager for 3 seasons now with the Royals, won a World Series each of those 3 years, and won Manager of the Year each of those 3 years. So we thought that might be in a challenging situation moving on from Byron Nichols, who won 2 World Series and I think 8 or 9 years as our manager, and Crosby's already outperformed him with 3 championships in 3 years and 3 Manager of the Year awards. And that is going to do it for the awards that the Royals actually won. Looking at the Rookie of the Year, we had nobody involved in the discussions there. AL Cy Young Award, Caleb Loggerwell got a couple of votes, but well behind Rogelio Loera of the Astros, who had 27 first-place votes. League best 17 wins, league best 363 strikeouts. Whew. League best 73 FIP minus and 6.2 WAR. So a brilliant year from the 24-year-old starting pitcher for the Astros. National League Cy Young Award, Agustin Herrera of the Mets, 15-12 with a league best 2.70 ERA and a league best 0.97 WHIP. AL MVP, Alex Fajardo of the Blue Jays edged out Mike Augustini. And our guy, Jonathan Ojeda, actually finished third in the voting with 1 first-place vote. Victor Aveyar and Javi Medina, a couple of our young outfielders, also got some votes for the American League Most Valuable Player. But Fajardo, who 288 average, 35 homers, 108 runs batted in, won the award. And over in the National League, Alex Palacio of the San Francisco Giants, brilliant hitting profile, third baseman. Nice year. 310 batting average, league best 47 homers, league best 131 runs driven in. Led the league in OPS, led the league in WRC plus, and led the league in WAR with a 9.2. So that looks to be a pretty logical most valuable player selection over in the National League. And before we get to salary arbitration, we'll do one last chance of signing Leo Aveyar before we get there. He still is not interested in talking to us since he's upset we sent him to AAA. So we've got the team offer in there. We're giving him a $100,000 raise, even though he spent most of the year in AAA. I think we got a pretty good chance of winning the arbitration hearing against him when we get to that. And Leo Aveyar will be back. The arbitrator did rule in favor of our $1.55 million offer, above the as compared to the $1.9 million he was looking for. You can see Aveyar is still angry, unhappy with his role on the team, so that could become a potential issue. Again, he's going to be battling with Fuchs for that backup catcher spot. Obviously, if someone gets injured, makes the decision potentially easier, but we'll deal with that in spring training. And the free agents have now filed. You can see the big names we thought: O'Neill Cruz, Juan Soto, Harold Nin, Cassius Thomas among them. Luis Robert still knocking around at 39 years old. So we'll dig into those in our next episode. I'll also take a quick look at the international free agents here. Doesn't appear to be. Angel Cabrera is a meh prospect. Bobby Vergara, right-handed reliever. Again, not really all that exciting. Yeah, not too much that is exciting out there. But looking at the potential free, or not even the potential free agents, the actual free agents now. Looking at the pitchers, a lot of relievers out there. But as we kind of talked about when we did decide to re-sign Pryor as a left-handed closer, Jesus Gonzalez is out there as a left-handed reliever. I don't know that he's really any better than Pryor. In fact, I don't think he is better than Pryor. He's also fragile, but he's not looking for a ton of money. He's certainly in the mix. Braylon Gonzalez probably would be, but he's looking for about $12.6 million a year, which I think is probably more than we're going to want to pay. But we do still have money to spend and not a ton of holes on the team. So, we're bringing back Pryor as a lefty out of the pen. We're bringing back Suarez as our closer. And we made the big trade of Mike Mcneil to bring on Smith as another arm in our bullpen. So even though free agency is only starting today, we've already made some improvements to our bullpen. And hopefully we'll continue to do that over the next month or so. We'll dig deep into free agency in our next episode. Until then, would love to hear what you think of the decisions and the choices that we made. And until that next episode, thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.